Spider-Man is coming to Magic the Gathering. Oh, not until September. Okay, well, we've got spoilers for some of the cards now. Don't think about the set that released a couple of minutes ago, and don't think about the long-awaited return to a beloved Magic setting that's happening very soon. And also don't think about the price hike that's coming when the Spider-Man cards actually release. Think about Venom, and Wotc, and Norman. I may be incapable of sounding sincere, but I do love Spidey. He's just the best superhero still. I've been a fan since before I can remember, and the Marvel Universe has always just been the extended Spider-Man universe to me. Whilst I haven't read comics for a few years, I will again, and I've read a decent wad of Spider-Man books in the past. So in lieu of talking about the power and playability of these spoiled cards, I want to talk about their flavour. How effective they are at representing the characters of the world of old P.T. Parkey within the game of Magic, using my half-remembered comics knowledge bolstered by typing things I didn't know into Google. Let's load these spoiled cards into our Spider Signal belt lights and project them right onto the alley wall, alarming all the criminals who wanted to wait until the set released. So the 6 Spider-Man cards that we have all come from the same product. One of those scene boxes they've done, I think only for the Lord of the Rings set before, although that might not be true. Is it just Lord of the Rings? Yeah, just Lord of the Rings. Scene boxes always come with the same 6 cards, the art of which bleeds into each other to create a grandiose scene, though that image obviously has to be somewhat limited by the nature of the composition. And with that in mind, it's a testament to all the artists we've had so far that most of these scenes have turned out so lovely, as they have to incorporate enough negative space for all that text, or at least space that doesn't mind being covered by text. And the major downside comes when you separate the image, and the issues of the composition affect the individual images, which is how they're going to be played, seeing as they're always a mix of permanents and spells. So as much as you might want to lay all these things out on the battlefield, and I suppose you could do that with Aragorn and his sword, etc., Legolas's quick reflexes to the side of that is an instant that's going to resolve and then go to the bin. But hey, you can put it there while it's resolving, I suppose. For the Spider-Man scene box image, Dan Dos Santos' art does an excellent job with the limitations of the composition, and I love the colours in this poppy presentation of a classic Spider-Man aesthetic. And on that note, everyone's costumes also present us a classic style. It's a kind of idealised vision of a typical Spider-Man aesthetic, to my mind. Obviously not a comic book style image, more just iconic Spidey filtered through the painted medium of magic art. So on that note, let's look at the characters that are being depicted, starting with Doc Ock, Evil Inventor. He costs 5 and blue and black for a legendary human scientist villain. He's an 8/8 and has, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target non-creature artifact you control becomes an 8/8 robot villain artifact creature in addition to its other types. The title Doc Ock, Evil Inventor and the Demir color pairing both feel very appropriate for the character. Evil Inventor describing him pretty well, and also how those two colors converge for him. 8/8 is fun for referencing his octopus nature and emphasizing his arm-amplified combat ability. I'm not a huge fan of him having no keywords, though. 8/8 is very powerful and represents his strength in that way effectively, sure, but could he not at least have vigilance or something just to represent the nature of the arms, which are in themselves very handy and able to accomplish lots of tasks rapidly, the kind of thing that you think would be represented by some keywords. Like, vigilance, again, is the one that first comes to mind, but you could really get away with anything, and it's just a bit of a weird thing they didn't have any. And again, then he costs 7, which is fine and obviously better than costing 8, but why not have him just cost 8 and give him a keyword or 2 as well? The other ability does feel quite flavorful in terms of him being an inventor, and having your non-creature artifact become an 8/8 creature obviously feels like the creation of the arms themselves. It's a little strange that you have to have an artifact already to become the invention, but then I suppose that speaks to the nature of invention as well, in that one project might morph into something else. I suppose if he's making the arms separate to himself and also has 8/8 power, then it feels a little strange. Doc Ock's first trick beyond having arms is operating them separate to himself, which he's done many times in the comics. And I'm sure he's been flanked by additional arms as well. But given that 8/8 is the only flavor that's evoking the octopus nature of him, it's a little weird that he's generating you 16 power immediately. The choice for the 3 villains on the box is pretty ideal, and I think most people would tell you that Spider-Man's 3 most iconic villains are Doc Ock, Venom, and the Green Goblin. Actually, if you look at the wiki page for any of those characters, they all just say that as well. And as one of the 3 pillars of Spider-Man's nemesis, Ock does a great job representing classic Spider-Man villains, being the eldest of the three, and being animal-themed, like so many of Spider-Man's rogues gallery are, especially the classic bunch. And Ock is easily the coolest of that lot, with his fancy arms allowing for lots of dynamic poses and creative action scenes, and his smug inventor nature, driving a lot of fun plotlines. At one point, he married Aunt May. At one point, he put his brain in Spider-Man and was Spider-Man for a bit. But more commonly than that, he's typically the leader of the Sinister Six whenever that inconsistent and constantly shuffling group reforms. Mostly as he doesn't have the resources of someone like Norman Osborn, who wouldn't need to rely on a bunch of low-level goons as much. But anyway, being the best representative of that more animal-themed group of Spider-Man's villains, it's kind of a shame that there is no octopus type represented anywhere on him. It's fine if you don't want to squeeze octopus into the type line that already contains legendary and human and scientist and villain. But couldn't the robot have been an octopus as well? Does the robot need to be a villain? Like, do we need to ascribe morality to Ock's inventions as well? Couldn't it just be a robot octopus? And why isn't it, honestly? Especially given that a lot of other characters in this set got flavorful types. They'll probably make less sense, even. It's very strange that there is no octopus type anywhere on this card. I do love Dan DeSantis' piece overall, and I really like this image of Ock as well, but this isn't my favorite pose or mood for the character. The sort of cackling, grasping hands, it's fun and silly. I do like the energy overall, but I prefer a sort of smug, I'm smarter than everyone kind of energy for Doc Ock. That's always more fun, and that's how I more imagine the classic iteration of the character, I suppose. But the "you're finished, Spider-Man" sort of pose is working here as well, so that's fine. Above Ock in the presentation are his grasping tentacles, which is a sorcery that costs 1 and a blue and a black. It's the same colors as its guy. Target opponent mills 8 cards. You may put an artifact card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Honestly, I would have preferred an artifact to represent the tentacles than a sorcery. Wouldn't it be more fun to have, like, a living weapon? Would have been great here. Obviously, maybe with something else other than a Phyrexian germ. But, you know, that type of thing. Or a reconfigure type thing, maybe. But with this art, I suppose that would have worked. Like, this looks a lot more like a spell than it does an artifact in the art that we have. The spell itself, I'm a bit confused, actually. It's not really the most... I suppose if this feels like, what's the word? Intellectual theft? Industrial espionage, which is definitely a thing he's done in the comics, raiding labs, etc., to steal bits that he needs for his own inventions, sure. In the art, he's just picking up a police car. I doubt he's going to use the police car for its function. Probably just going to throw it at Spider-Man, which doesn't really feel like the flavor of putting the thing onto the battlefield under your control. But it's not completely off. Let's move on to Green Goblin Nemesis. He's 2 and a black and a red for a legendary goblin human villain. He's a 3/3 and he flies. Whenever you discard a non-land card, put a +1 counter on target goblin you control. Whenever you discard a land card, create a tapped treasure token. I think this, of all the villain cards, probably of all the cards actually, of all the cards in this group, this is my favorite flavorfully. Doing a great job at representing the madness of, well, I suppose Norman Osborn, but this could also be Harry Osborn, and he was pretty crazy too. I suppose we are to assume this is Norman Osborn, as he is typically the Green Goblin that is regarded as Spider-Man's nemesis. Red and black is a common color combination used to represent madness, as is discarding cards, and he does both those things. So for discarding a non-land card and putting a +1 counter on target goblin you control, the goblin tribal element is a bit silly and fun and makes him a more functional commander, say. Even if the flavor of the Green Goblin isn't really making an army of goblins, but obviously he can target himself and grow stronger. Doing a good job at representing the goblin serum's effect on himself, trading sanity for power. Creating a tapped treasure token whenever you discard a land as well, with treasure perhaps representing the businessman element of Norman Osborn's character. But ultimately, I think playing this card will let you feel like you're gaining strength by sinking into madness, funneling more and more resources in a way that should be counterintuitive, but, of course, benefits the Green Goblin. Without having played any of them, this one feels to me like playing it would make me feel like the character the most. And obviously, he flies, because he has a flying glider. Yes, it's mechanically good. My issues with the card come from a juxtaposition between the name and the art, where all 3 of these characters in this box could be considered Spider-Man's arch nemesis and are to different people. But Green Goblin's the only card that's been given the name Nemesis. And there's definitely a contingent of fans who regard the Green Goblin as Spider-Man's true arch nemesis. A position that was kind of solidified when he killed Gwen Stacy early in the comics. And over the years, the character has sort of evolved to be more Lex Luthor-esque, but kind of more fun, because he has this fun duality nature between this sort of almost self-imposed Jekyll Hyde element, where he leans into all his worst impulses as the Green Goblin. But given that he's presented here as Green Goblin, Nemesis, like, this is the guy, why is he in the right corner of the image? And of all the characters, he's sort of least prominent in the composition, the most in the background. His pose, he's like leaning around the side, like, remember me? And it's like, that's not the energy for Nemesis. Like, Venom's in the middle, and he's like leaning over with this like commanding, like, run little spider kind of pose, and it just it's that energy for Nemesis is so much greater in the image of him than it is in Green Goblin. Like, I really like the pose of the Green Goblin here. It just doesn't go with the name, and it doesn't really fit with like a card I want to run as my commander in the same way that the mechanics do so well. I don't dislike it, honestly. I really like the underlighting as well from the sunset / fire. I like his pose a lot. It just doesn't read as like Green Goblin, Nemesis. It's not commanding enough. He's an addition to the greater image, and he even feels so in his own cut-off card. He's sort of like not quite properly centered in the frame with his glider, etc., and like Venom's leg and arm reaching in, and so much of the frame taken up by things that are just like bits of images that aren't in this one. I think this card is the one where the art is hurt the most by the grander composition. And it's just a bit of a shame. It's absolutely not terrible. I really like the way this character has been depicted in kind of isolation. It's just the composition is a little bit off here for presenting the character as the name and mechanics are trying to do. Well, not really the mechanics, just the name. Green Goblin also comes with Pumpkin Bomb. It's underneath him. Pumpkin Bombs, even. It's 1 and a red for an artifact. You can tap it and discard 2 cards and draw 3 cards, then put a fuse counter on this artifact. It deals damage equal to the number of fuse counters on it to target opponent. They gain control of this artifact. I really want to play with this card, and I like the look of it as a card. It looks like a lot of fun to pass around the commander table. I suppose it'd be difficult to ensure you get it back. But then you could make a deal, right? Like, I'll give this to you if you give it back to me. Because it seems like otherwise your opponent's just gonna pass it around and then give it back to you when it's gonna hit you for loads. I like the card a lot. I don't really think the flavor goes super well with Pumpkin Bombs. And maybe they should just be a bit more typical, because that's kind of what Pumpkin Bombs do, right? Maybe they've been evolved over the years in comics I haven't read, but I like the classic iteration of a Pumpkin Bomb just explodes. It just looks cool before it does. Maybe it like emits some gas sometimes and it explodes a little bit later, but then, yeah. I'm sure there's like an edge case use of Pumpkin Bombs that maybe this feels like or something. And obviously this does create the flavor of like passing a bomb back and forth before it goes off, but it's hitting you along the way and not really ever exploding. So I suppose it introduces a bit of madness and mayhem, which is very Goblin themed. It's not like wrong flavor of this card. I think playing this card even will feel goblin-y when you're doing it in a Green Goblin deck. It just doesn't really evoke the flavor of Pumpkin Bombs, or how they typically work. And last of the 3 villains, in the order that I've arbitrarily picked, is Venom, Deadly Devourer. He's 2 and black and green for a legendary symbiote villain. He's a 4/4 with vigilance and menace. He's also got an activated ability of pay 3 to exile target creature card from a graveyard. When you do, put X +1 counters on target symbiote, where X is the exiled card's toughness. The stats and the keywords, I feel, do a fairly good job of representing Venom's power in combat, as he's essentially a souped-up Spider-Man with a big scary mouth, and sometimes goo powers, sort of. But the name, Deadly Devourer, and the ability, the flavor is a little weird. It does a great job of creating the idea of Venom consuming corpses. Exiling a creature card from a graveyard and putting +1 counters either on Venom or another symbiote feel a lot like Venom consuming a corpse. Maybe even providing sustenance to his symbiote offspring, as the Venom symbiote did reproduce Carnage, basically. So he's like a sort of a symbiote progenitor in a way. And I had to do a bit of research to check my assumptions with this. By a bit of research, I mean reading what I hope is well-researched article on, is it Comic Book Reader? I can't remember what CBR stands for. Anyway, an article by Brian Cronin. Does Venom like eating people, or is he compelled to eat people? This was actually incredibly useful at confirming what I thought, which is that Eddie Brock doesn't really eat people. The symbiote absolutely wants to eat and consume humans, etc. And Venom makes lots of threats of eating people's brains. It's definitely a thing he's told Spider-Man many a time. I remember the cliche of that line being brought up in the comic cliche, even. The one time that Venom succumbed to the dark desires of the symbiote and did start eating someone's brain, he immediately recoiled in disgust at what he'd done. I'm not a current comic book reader, so I'm not up to date on the most current iteration of Venom, but classic Eddie Brock Venom, as this art appears to depict, just doesn't really ever fit the title Deadly Devourer at any point in his career that I'm aware of. Thank you, Brian Cronin. But, Venom may hate Spider-Man and began his career as a villain with the goal of messing up Peter, but the character quickly evolved into kind of a dark anti-hero, struggling with the impulses and dark desires of the symbiote. And that anti-hero status, I suppose, would have been better represented by white-black as opposed to black-green, which I suppose black-green can lend well to the idea of this sort of predatory idea of Venom as almost like an apex predator in feeding his own symbiote brood. But again, that's not really the character as we know it. Absolutely not the Eddie Brock Venom, the classic iteration which this art appears to depict. There's other Venoms that would have fit this type as well. I remember the Ultimate Venom eating a horse at one point. I'm pretty sure the movie version of Venom, not that they can necessarily use that one, but I'm pretty sure that guy eats people occasionally, right? And I remember when Matt Gargan, the Scorpion, was briefly like a more soulless version of Venom. And the article I'm going to keep referring back to notes how Scorpion Venom was constantly taking chunks out of people and just eating squirrels for fun. So perhaps, if this card gets different art in the actual set, maybe it will depict the Matt Gargan Venom instead, and it would probably be, it feels like it's great mechanically for depicting that character, just not Eddie Brock as the art depicts. They had different costumes, if you see what I mean. Maybe, again, I'm not, the most knowledgeable of Venom lore, of all of Venom lore, so perhaps other characters have worn this exact, or have had the symbiote appear this exact way on them, whilst eating people, but for, I was saying, the very, classic Spider-Man nature of this, product, you'd think they'd be going for Eddie Brock Venom as the art depicts, and it just doesn't mechanically feel like him, really. And then we come to the flavor that I'm perhaps the most let down by. It's so sad to say. The sensational Spider-Man. He's 1 and white and blue for a 3/3 Spider-Human hero. Whenever sensational Spider-Man attacks, tap target creature defending player controls and put a stun counter on it. Then you may remove up to 3 stun counters from among all permanents. Draw cards equal to the number of stun counters removed this way. Azorius works fairly well for depicting the character white through a sense of justice, I suppose, and blue representing Peter's intellect, I guess, because he is a sciencey boy, making his web shoes, etc. And sometimes working at sciencey companies in various points in his spidery career. I feel like most Marvel heroes will fit comfortably within Jeskai somewhere, and maybe a true version of representing every side of the character I feel would include Red in some way as his interpretation of the lesson that drives him is a very, it's an emotional response for Peter. It's not a logical decision or a desire for self-improvement that drives him forward. It's guilt, basically. So I feel like Red is better at representing that than the other two colors. But still, there's nothing wrong with an Azorius Spider-Man. I think that's fine. And attacking and putting stun counters on things feels quite flavorful. I like that he has to attack to do it and then do it to a defending creature because it feels more like a singular sort of combat encounter. He's not just swinging one place and then shooting web off in somewhere else. It feels like he's sort of engaging in combat with your opponent's creature, which I like. And stun counters obviously just feel like perfect flavor for webbing someone up. Ideal. Stun counter, webbing, 1-to-1 almost in my mind. That's fine. Then you may remove up to 3 stun counters from among all permanents and draw cards equal to the number of stun counters removed this way. But I don't really understand the flavor of this. It's a good ability for making him build aroundable as a commander, which is nice. But what's happening? I don't really understand what the flavor lore of this is. It feels like Peter's some sort of bounty hunter who's getting paid to release your opponent's creatures back out onto the streets, even, which is just really bloody weird. Yeah, I don't understand. I can't really make that flavor work. Is it something to do with photography? No, that doesn't work anyway. I'm trying to think of some way that Spider-Man is generating these cards. He's cashing in on the encounters in some way by selling the pictures. But that's not really that flavor at all, is it? I don't know. That's just come out of left field. I don't know where I'm going with that. I don't get it. I don't know what's happening when I remove those counters. Threat solved. A reward for a spider mission complete. I don't understand. It might make him fun to build around, but just what is happening? And then the biggest letdown of the card is that there are no keywords. Spider-Man has no keywords. I cannot believe that sentence is true. I hate this Flavour so much. He's a 3-3 for 3. Obviously, he has another ability, which is quite strong. It's strongish. But no keywords, Spider-Man! I'm actually baffled. Like, keywords obviously typically represent combat prowess and ability in some regard. A creature with, vigilance isn't tapping like your other lame creatures that have to tap. A creature with first strike is going to win a combat encounter with another one. Skill in combat and even simple enhancements, like horses and bows, translate into tangible benefits for your creatures through their in-game representation. A creature without these abilities is less adept than one with. And then Spider-Man, the superhero perhaps most known for agility, always characterized as by these super dynamic poses. Like he is here, showing us his leg and crotch, like he's about to lick himself like a cat, which would look weird for lots of characters, but for Spider-Man, it looks great. He's the web slinger, he's swinging around. He's got superhuman reflexes and speed and agility in order to, and the spider sense, everything about Spider-Man is contributing to this fast-moving, agile character. And he has no keywords. He doesn't have a single thing, no vigilance, no first strike. I feel like every Spider-Man-esque character should have reach, right? If the Green Goblin swings in to attack you, this fucking Spider-Man is going to sit there and do nothing, unable to repel the Green Goblin. I don't think you can give Spider-Man flying, but he definitely should have reach, and then maybe even some sort of combat ability that represents, I feel like he should have evasion. Maybe, again, representing flying in some way, you could have him gain flying until end of turn when he attacks, so I think even that flavor would work well to represent web slinging. But I also like the idea of giving him menace, because obviously he's a menace. So yeah, it takes 2 guys to block your agile Spider-Man and J. Jonah Jameson quote, so ideal. But nothing is unacceptable. There has to be something there. It just makes Peter look like a chump. It's like Spider-Man, the archetype of agility, has nothing to represent that agility. That is upsetting. It feels horrible. We have an agility test in Magic that Spider-Man would fail. Path of Metal from Ixalan, when it enters, deals 1 damage to each creature that doesn't have first strike, double strike, vigilance, or haste. Can't even pass the Ixalan agility test. I might build this for Cockatrice in the interim while we wait for more Spider-Man cards, but I'm just not that excited about it. I feel like most Marvel heroes don't really lend themselves to the idea of being the general of your army, and kind of flavorfully push you more towards Voltron-esque strategies. And obviously you'll want to run this as stun counter tribal. That's the theme of this deck, clearly. But he's just such a bad Voltron commander. I want to swing in with my Spider-Man and have him be the main figure of my Spider-Man deck. But be cooler, easier to do if he had some kind of evasion, please. I know he does tap things in front of him, sure. But yeah, it's just a bit of a letdown overall. Ultimately, most of my problems, particularly with this Spider-Man card, and with lots of these other cards, I'm sure, will be solved when the set as a whole comes out. And we get lots of other versions of these cards, which there is precedent for, because when the Lord of the Rings set came out, we had tons of different versions. There's 4 or 5 Aragorns and Saurons, etc. So it would be flabbergasting if there weren't more Spider-Mans in the Spider-Man set. This isn't even, Sensational Spider-Man isn't even, the first moniker that you would give Spider-Man. I'm assuming that the main Spider-Man, or whatever Spider-Man Prime is, will be called the Amazing Spider-Man, you would guess. And Spidey has a lot of things going on, obviously, between the web swinging and the shooting webbing things up and having spider sense and agility, etc. There's a lot of different mechanics you could represent the character with, and I'm sure that they'll be sprinkled across the different versions of the character that we get, and ultimately we will gain the sense of Spider-Man, the character, through his many iterations, I'm sure. But outside of flatly representing webbing something up fairly well through stun counters, this just isn't a strong interpretation of the character. And if I knew this was the only version of Spider-Man we were getting, I'd be really mad. It just isn't good enough. It can't and won't happen, but how crazy will it be if all the different versions of Peter's Spider-Man don't have bloody keywords? So yes, I'm sure that lots of the problems I have with all of these cards could be addressed by different versions when the set's released, but as the intro that we got for this, it's quite disappointing. It's not horrible, but they're just not that inspiring of a group of cards. I'll probably build Green Goblin because he looks like fun. But again, I wish his art actually delivered the feeling of Nemesis even. So there isn't really one of them that's a slam dunk. They're all kind of meh. Some strong elements amongst all of them, but absolutely none of them escape without weakness either. Between this and bloody Fallout, why is it always the properties that I like the most that turn into the worst Universes Beyond sets, apparently? again, as a premature opinion, I don't know yet until the full set comes out. God alive, I hope those Avatar cards are good, though. And I hope they include Korra, mostly for the villains. Oh, Amon as some kind of no-abilities tribal commander, who can also remove creatures' abilities. Oh, and his positive effects for no-ability creatures should apply to the whole board, creating like a fun push and pull between his mechanics, and representing his proposed desire for equality, and his duplicity, as of course he himself has abilities. And I need a Zahir card, I need one. And I want him to be able to minus X the air out of my opponent's creature's lungs, and also to get a flying counter once, maybe when a legendary creature on your side dies. And then maybe also some build-aroundable effect for Commander. Can you just do all that for me, please? Regular, non-Universes Beyond Magic the Gathering content will return with next video, which might actually be about the Khans rather than Amonkhet. I'm going to still finish my Amonkhet video, I just got distracted by the Khans Planeswalker's Guide and I need to talk about it. But thanks for watching this video anyway. Subscribe, please, and then give me money so I can continue to tell you why the Spider-Man cards do the opposite of what everyone said about Insomniac Spider-Man a few years ago, and they don't make me feel like Spider-Man at all. My Brasquire and Parcelmere, all your names are here. And I am not rhyming intentionally, and I've stopped now, and I appreciate your support immensely. And before we're all swept up by the ball, I just want to say thank you. Oh, it looks like I've still got some time before the ball crushes us all. I'll use it to make the assertion that I've never made the joke about the ball rolling us over before, and list the names of the Mere in the ball. And they are Sebastian Rees, Marshall Mere, Eric Vaughan, Librarian of Leng, Steve-O, Chonga the Banished Mole King, Patrick Dane, Mimeo, Bob, and Darkflame. Thank you all immensely for your support. It warms and nourishes my heart back from the cold state these Spider-Man cards have left it in. And all that remains to be done today is to head to Scryfall and hit the random card button. The card that Scryfall has for us today is, Kuon, Ogre Ascendant. He's one of those cool flip cards from Kamigawa. Oh, I love these cards, I thought they were rad. I like this style. They should bring this back, put it back in something. Just put it in like a Modern Horizons set or something like that. Just give us one. Come on, man. Or give us a whole cycle. That'd be cool. Until then, may Kuon and his essence be with you.